Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we are going to talk through The Paradox of Choice: Why More is Less by Barry Schwartz, published in 2004. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Okay, let's get started. In his book, The Paradox of Choice: Why More is Less, Barry Schwartz explores the consequences of an abundance of choices in modern consumer culture. He begins with a personal anecdote about the overwhelming number of options he faced when buying a pair of jeans, highlighting the burden of decision-making that comes with an increase in choices. Schwartz argues that while having choices can bring autonomy and control, too many choices can be paralyzing and lead to dissatisfaction. He examines how choice overload affects various aspects of our lives, such as happiness, regret, and comparison with others. Ultimately, Schwartz suggests that embracing voluntary constraints, seeking good enough rather than the absolute best, and reducing attention to what others are doing can alleviate the negative effects of excessive choice. The book explores the concept of expanded choice in various aspects of modern life, such as shopping for stereo systems, clothing, education, and entertainment. It discusses the increasing number of options available in these areas and the potential consequences of having too many choices. The author shares personal experiences and research studies to highlight the drawbacks of excessive choices. For instance, having an overwhelming number of options can lead to decision fatigue, lower satisfaction with choices, and difficulty in making informed decisions. Despite the potential negative effects, the author acknowledges that expanded choices also provide benefits, such as greater freedom and access to diverse knowledge and products. Schwartz suggests that finding a balance between choice and simplicity is essential in navigating today's overwhelmingly abundant options. The increasing number of choices available to consumers is discussed in this book excerpt. While freedom of choice is often celebrated in our culture, too many options can lead to dissatisfaction and overwhelm. The rise of the voluntary simplicity movement reflects a growing discontent with having too many decisions and not enough time. However, Schwartz questions whether this movement truly simplifies life, as it seems to focus on catering to individual wants rather than addressing the problem of excessive choice. His book also explores the proliferation of choices in various areas, such as utilities, health insurance, and retirement plans. While having options can be beneficial, it also requires individuals to educate themselves and make informed decisions, a task that not everyone is willing or able to do. Moreover, the responsibility of making choices has shifted from regulators to individuals, increasing the potential for bad decisions or exploitation. The author discusses how the responsibility of medical care has shifted from doctors to patients. Previously, doctors made decisions without consulting patients and even withheld information. However, now the patient plays a more active role in their healthcare, with doctors presenting choices and patients making decisions. While this shift has improved the quality of care, it has also posed challenges for patients, especially in terms of sorting through vast amounts of information and making decisions. The burden of decision-making is particularly overwhelming for women who are often responsible for not only their own health, but also that of their family. The writer also touches on the idea of choice in other areas of life, such as appearance, work, and relationships, highlighting the constant decision-making faced by individuals in modern society. There's increasing trend towards tolerance of diverse romantic relationships, as well as the freedom of choice when it comes to religious affiliation and personal identity. It explores how individuals now have the ability to choose their own values, join communities that align with their beliefs, and even choose aspects of their inherited identity. However, with this freedom of choice comes the burden of decision-making. The author describes the process of decision-making and emphasizes the importance of knowing one's goals when making choices. He also delves into the concept of utility and how our expectations, experiences, and memories influence our choices. Overall, the writer highlights the multitude of choices we face in modern society, both big and small, and the impact they have on our lives. A group of patients in a study reported their experience as less unpleasant than the first group, even though they experienced the same discomfort and even additional discomfort for a longer period of time. The difference was that the second group had a milder end experience, which influenced how they remembered the overall experience. This memory of a less unpleasant experience led to higher compliance with follow-up procedures compared to the first group. Our evaluation of positive experiences is also influenced by the feelings at their peak and the end. We tend to remember a one-week vacation that ends on a high note as more pleasurable than a longer vacation with a less exciting ending. However, our preferences and memories don't always align with our actual wants. We can also be easily influenced by advertising and familiar brands, often making decisions based on familiarity rather than objective evaluation. Gathering information is also a challenge due to the overwhelming amount of advertisements and information available. Additionally, people often rely on availability heuristics, giving more weight to vivid and salient information rather than objectively evaluating all the available information. The availability heuristic is the tendency for people to rely on easily accessible information when making judgments or decisions. This can lead to biases and errors in thinking. Examples of the availability heuristic in action include college students being more influenced by a vivid interview with a single student than by summaries of course evaluations, people's opinions being shifted by vivid interviews of atypical individuals, and our tendency to overestimate dramatic causes of death and underestimate mundane causes based on media coverage. The availability heuristic can also be influenced by framing, or the way in which choices are presented, as well as anchor points, or the context in which prices or options are compared. Ultimately, our susceptibility to biases and errors can be mitigated by diverse sources of information and social interactions. The author discusses prospect theory, which explains how individuals evaluate options and make decisions. Prospect theory explains that individuals experience diminishing marginal utility with positive events, meaning that the subjective satisfaction decreases as the magnitude of the gain increases. On the other hand, individuals experience decreasing marginal disutility with losses, meaning that losing the first $100 hurts more than losing the second $100. Schwartz also highlights the endowment effect, where individuals place a higher value on items they already possess, leading them to be less likely to trade or give up those items. The effects of prospect theory and the endowment effect can impact decision-making and lead to biases and errors when assessing options. Furthermore, the increase in options and opportunities can lead individuals to become pickers rather than choosers, resulting in less thoughtful decision-making. The writer also discusses the concept of maximizing versus satisficing when making decisions. Maximizers are individuals who aim to choose the absolute best option and are willing to put in a lot of effort and time to evaluate all alternatives before making a choice. Satisficers, on the other hand, are content with finding something that is good enough and don't worry about the possibility of something better. The chapter presents a survey to help determine an individual's propensity for maximizing or satisficing and explains the characteristics and behaviors associated with each type. It also explores the negative impacts of maximizing, such as decreased happiness and increased regret. The chapter concludes by introducing a regret scale to measure an individual's tendency to experience regret in decision-making. Maximizing relates to decision-making and personal well-being. Maximizers are individuals who constantly seek the best option and have high standards for their choices. However, while maximizers may have better objective outcomes, they tend to feel less satisfied subjectively compared to satisficers, who settle for a good enough option. Schwartz also explores the relationship between maximizing and perfectionism, indicating that perfectionists have high standards they don't expect to meet, while maximizers have high standards they believe they can achieve. He concludes that the proliferation of choices may contribute to individuals becoming maximizers, as the availability of options can lead to increased scrutiny and dissatisfaction. While choice is critical to freedom and autonomy, the author argues that modern Americans, who have more choice than ever before, do not seem to be benefiting from it psychologically. Choice allows individuals to pursue their preferences and express themselves, but it may also lead to dissatisfaction and feelings of helplessness. The author suggests that there may be a point at which too many choices become overwhelming, and that selectively exercising choices may be necessary for mental well-being. Research on happiness shows that money does matter to some extent, but once a society reaches a certain level of wealth, further increases have little effect on happiness. The most important factor for happiness is close social connections rather than wealth. Marriage, friendships, and family relations contribute more to subjective well-being than financial status. However, it is unclear whether happiness leads to close relations or vice versa. Close relationships also limit freedom and choice, such as commitment to a partner or responsibilities in friendships and family. Despite the belief that freedom of choice leads to fulfillment, research indicates that increased affluence and freedom have not increased well-being. In fact, there has been a decrease in well-being and an increase in stress, depression, and dissatisfaction. The burden of choice is a significant factor, as individuals struggle to balance their desire for freedom with the need for social connection and commitment. Establishing rules, presumptions, standards, and routines can help ease the burden of decision-making and allow more time for meaningful social connections. However, finding the balance between freedom and commitment is a personal challenge, and societies must decide the value of individual freedom versus the benefits of constraints imposed by social institutions. Trade-offs affects decision-making. Every choice we make has opportunity costs, meaning that by choosing one option, we are giving up the opportunities that another option could have provided. The more options we have to choose from, the greater our experience of opportunity costs, and the less satisfaction we may derive from our chosen alternative. A study on the psychology of trade-offs, where participants were asked to make decisions based on various features, such as safety and price, found that people placed a higher value on safety and were unwilling to trade it for a lower price. Overall, Schwartz suggests that having too many choices can lead to dissatisfaction and difficulty in decision-making. The researchers have found that when people are faced with making trade-offs in their decisions, they become unhappy and indecisive. This is because trade-offs create conflict and uncertainty. For example, when given the choice between two cars, one being safer but more expensive, people are reluctant to trade off safety for price. This reluctance applies to both high-stakes and low-stakes decisions. As a result, people often avoid or postpone making decisions when faced with trade-offs. Adding more options only makes decision-making more difficult and increases the likelihood of decision avoidance. The presence of alternative choices creates conflict and forces people to consider trade-offs, making it harder for them to make a decision. Additionally, the emotional unpleasantness associated with trade-offs can negatively impact decision-making, as negative emotions narrow focus and distract from the decision itself. On the other hand, positive emotions can enhance decision-making by allowing for more open-mindedness and considering alternative possibilities. Ultimately, considering opportunity costs and trade-offs is important in decision-making, but it is crucial to limit the number of options to prevent decision dissatisfaction and decision avoidance. Having more options available does not always lead to greater satisfaction or better decision-making. In several studies, it was found that having too many choices actually decreased the likelihood of making a purchase or choosing an option. This phenomenon is known as the paradox of choice. When faced with numerous options, people may become overwhelmed and struggle to make a decision. Additionally, when individuals are asked to provide reasons for their preferences, it can further complicate decision-making. They may focus on superficial reasons or ones that are not necessarily the most important factors in making a choice. This can lead to dissatisfaction with the chosen option in the long run. This paradox of choice is particularly evident in important life decisions, such as career choices, where individuals may struggle to prioritize their goals and make a definitive decision. Regret is a common emotion associated with decision-making. People often wonder if they made the right choice and struggle with the idea of missed opportunities. The pressure to make the perfect decision is especially prevalent in today's world of endless choices. However, research suggests that having too many options can lead to indecision and dissatisfaction. This is because the more options one has, the more opportunity costs they face. In addition, the possibility of reversing a decision may seem comforting, but studies show that this actually leads to less satisfaction with the chosen option. Maximizers who constantly seek the best choice are more susceptible to regret and less happy overall. The phenomenon of omission bias also plays a role in regret, where people often regret actions that didn't turn out well more than failures to act. Moreover, the closeness to achieving a desired outcome affects the intensity of regret. Overall, regret is a complex emotion that can significantly impact decision-making and satisfaction with outcomes. The author explores how regret affects our decision-making. The feeling of regret is often triggered by the idea that we could have chosen differently and achieved a better outcome. Regret is especially powerful when we are responsible for the outcome and when the difference between success and failure is small. Counterfactual thinking is the ability to imagine alternative scenarios that didn't happen. Counterfactual thinking can lead to increased regret and negative emotions. The writer further highlights how regret can influence our choices, causing us to avoid decision-making altogether or make conservative choices to minimize the chances of experiencing regret. People often experience regret whether they choose to buy something or not. Inaction inertia is common, where individuals avoid making a decision to keep the possibility of finding something better open. The writer also introduces the idea of sunk costs, where people hold on to things they no longer need or want in order to avoid acknowledging their loss. It highlights how regret is influenced by personal responsibility and the availability of choice. Schwartz then explains the phenomenon of adaptation, where people get used to things and start taking them for granted. He mentions the disappointment that can arise when reality fails to live up to expectations due to adaptation. Hedonic adaptation refers to the human tendency to get used to and eventually become less satisfied with pleasurable experiences over time. The author gives examples of how individuals adjust their levels of happiness and satisfaction based on their reference points and new experiences. The phenomenon of hedonic adaptation is illustrated through the experiences of lottery winners and accident victims who, despite their drastic life changes, eventually converge in their subjective well-being. The writer also emphasizes the disappointment that can arise from adapting to durable goods and the pursuit of novelty as a means of maintaining pleasure. Furthermore, he highlights the tendency for individuals to mispredict their future feelings and the role of adaptation in decision-making processes. The main idea is that humans have a natural inclination to adapt to pleasurable experiences, which can lead to decreased satisfaction and the need for novelty in order to find continued happiness. The more choices we have, the more effort we put into our decisions, and the more we expect to enjoy the benefits. However, adaptation shortens the duration of those benefits, leading us to feel that the result wasn't worth the effort. This is especially true for maximizers, those who strive for the best and make big investments in each decision, as they agonize over trade-offs. Adapting to our choices can make us see choice as more of a burden than a liberator. To combat this, we should consider how our options will feel in the long run. Focus on gratitude for what we have, and be mindful of our expectations. The curse of high expectations contributes to the dissatisfaction we feel in our experiences as our standards of acceptability keep rising. The proliferation of choices also raises our expectations, which plays into the tendency to be a maximizer. It is important to control our expectations to improve our quality of life. Social comparison impacts our happiness and satisfaction. Schwartz emphasizes the importance of keeping expectations modest and not constantly comparing ourselves to others. Social comparison plays a significant role in how we evaluate our experiences and can lead to jealousy, negative mood, and lowered self-esteem when we compare ourselves to others who are better off. However, there are instances where upward social comparisons can motivate and inspire us. Our desire for status drives social comparison. Schwartz highlights the problem of perpetual social comparison and dissatisfaction caused by an unequal distribution of positional goods. He argues that addressing social comparison requires both changing individual attitudes and addressing the systemic factors can promote positional competition. Happy people are less affected by social comparison than unhappy individuals. Subjective happiness scale measures an individual's own perception of their happiness. From a study investigates the difference in response to negative feedback between happy and unhappy individuals. The findings suggest that happy people have the ability to distract themselves and move on, while unhappy people tend to ruminate and make themselves more miserable. Maximizers who seek the best option are more affected by social comparison and external opinions, while satisficers who aim for good enough rely more on their own internal assessments. Schwartz emphasizes the negative impact of unlimited choice on happiness and the prevalence of depression, emphasizing the importance of having control in life for psychological well-being. The author discusses Seligman's theory of helplessness-based depression and how it has been modified over time. It explains that people ask themselves why they experience failure or lack of control, and their explanations can be categorized as global or specific, chronic or transient, and personal or universal. The revised theory suggests that helplessness leads to depression when individuals attribute their failures to global, chronic, and personal causes. Depression rates in modern society arises despite increased control and autonomy. Rising expectations and individualism, coupled with a tendency to blame oneself for failure, contribute to this phenomenon. Maximizers, who have high expectations and intensively blame themselves, are more prone to depression. People who score high on the maximization scale often experience borderline clinical depression. The relentless experience of disappointment and taking personal responsibility for it can lead to feelings of not being able to do anything right. Additionally, the author discusses the distinction between personal autonomy and control at an individual level and their ecological effects on society. Nations that value personal freedom and control the most tend to have higher suicide rates. He also addresses the strategies individuals can adopt to overcome choice overload, including choosing when to choose, being a chooser instead of a picker, satisficing instead of maximizing, considering opportunity costs, and making non-reversible decisions. These strategies aim to simplify decision-making and increase satisfaction. Reversibility and finality. I mapped our decision-making process. When we have the option to change our minds, we are less satisfied with our decisions. On the other hand, when a decision is final, we engage in psychological processes that enhance our feelings about the choice we made. The author emphasizes the importance of making non-reversible decisions, especially in important areas of life such as choosing a life partner. He also highlights the significance of gratitude in increasing satisfaction with our choices and experiences. By practicing gratitude and focusing on what is good about our decisions, we can reduce disappointment and regret. We tend to adapt and become less satisfied with experiences over time. Schwartz advises that managing expectations and avoiding social comparison to enhance satisfaction. Lastly, learning to love and embrace constraints can help simplify decision-making and free up time and energy for more meaningful choices. Thank you so much for watching this video. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'll see you in the next video.